All right, let's get into one of the most game-changing events in all of history, the French Revolution. We're not just going to walk through what happened. We're going to dig into the why it all went down, and how it basically invented the political world we live in today. All those ideas about liberty, equality, and what it means to be a citizen, a lot of that starts right here. So picture this. It's July 14th, 1789. The air in Paris is thick with panic and rage. Word on the street is the king is about to send in the army against his own people. So, thousands of Parisians, desperate for weapons to defend themselves, they all turn their eyes to this one massive, grim symbol of the king's power, the Bastille prison. What happens next is just pure chaos. They storm the fortress, it falls, and that one act becomes the flashpoint for, well, for everything. You see, the fall of the Bastille was like the dam breaking. But the pressure behind that dam, the floodwaters of revolution, they'd been rising for decades. So the real question is, what brought an entire country to that point? How does one of the most powerful monarchies in Europe just crumble? To really get the revolution, we have to rewind and look at what France was actually like before 1789. They call this period the Old Regime, and honestly, it was a kingdom sitting on a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. Okay, first up, the money, or the lack of it. When King Louis XVI took the throne, the royal bank account was pretty much empty. I mean, look at this list. You had decades of nonstop expensive wars. You had the absolutely insane cost of running the court at Versailles. And the real kicker? They'd spent a fortune helping the American colonies break away from Britain. All of this pushed the national debt to over 2 billion livres. And with lenders charging a whopping 10% interest, the government was basically just running to stand still. The state was flat broke. But here's the thing. This wasn't just a simple money problem. It was all tangled up in this deeply, deeply unfair social system that France had been running on for centuries. French society was basically sliced into 3 groups: the estates. And check out this breakdown, it's wild. You've got the first estate, the clergy, and the second estate, the nobility. Together, they're like maybe 3% of the population, yet they owned most of the land, had all the best jobs, and, this is the crucial part, paid pretty much 0 taxes. So who paid for everything? The third estate, which was literally everyone else. We're talking peasants, lawyers, merchants, you name it. 97% of the people were footing the bill for the other 3%. It was completely unsustainable. And this image, right here, it just perfectly captures how people felt. This was a really popular drawing back then. The nobleman is the spider, just getting fat in his web, and the peasant is the fly, trapped, forced to give up everything. It's such a simple, powerful way to show just how rotten and exploitative the whole system felt to people. And a huge source of that anger came from this one tax, the taille. This was the main tax that paid for the state to run, and it was dumped entirely on the third estate. Can you imagine that? You work your hands to the bone, and then a huge chunk of what you earn is taken away to prop up a system that gives you absolutely no power and no voice. So, you've got a government with no money and a society that's fundamentally broken. That's the fuel for the fire. But what was the spark that actually lit the match? Well, it was a collision of 2 things: real, physical hardship and a whole new way of thinking about the world. See, for most of the 1700s, the population of France was booming, but they weren't growing enough food to keep up. So, whenever a bad harvest hit, it kicked off this horrifying chain reaction you see here. Grain gets scarce, the price of bread, the main food for the poor, skyrockets. The poorest people can't afford to eat, which leads to riots and, eventually, starvation. And this wasn't some one-time thing. It was a cycle of misery. This is what's known as a subsistence crisis. It's a technical-sounding term, but it means something really simple and really brutal. A situation where huge numbers of people are in actual, immediate danger of starving to death. This was the reality for so many in France. Now, at the very same time this is happening, you've got this incredible intellectual movement spreading, called the Enlightenment. You've got thinkers putting out these radical new ideas. John Locke comes along and says, hey, maybe kings don't have a God-given right to rule. Then Montesquieu proposes splitting up government power into different branches so no one gets too powerful. And then you have Rousseau, who takes it a step further. Rousseau's idea of a social contract was a bombshell. He basically argued that a government is only legitimate if the people agree to be governed. It's power from the bottom up, not the top down. This one idea just completely pulls the rug out from under the whole concept of an absolute king and gives the third estate a whole new language to demand change. So the country's broke, the people are starving, and these electric new ideas about freedom and rights are in the air. The stage is set. King Louis has to raise taxes, but this time, the Third Estate is not going to just roll over. They're ready to fight back. And just look at how fast things exploded in 1789. On May 5th, the king calls a meeting of the estates, but he tries to force the old rigged voting rules. The Third Estate says no way and walks out. By June 20th, they're in a tennis court, declaring themselves a national assembly and swearing to write a new constitution. Less than a month later, the Bastille is stormed, and by August 4th, the assembly gets rid of the entire feudal system. Centuries of tradition, just gone. In 3 months. What was happening wasn't just a riot or a rebellion. It was the birth of a totally new France. It was a moment that changed people from being subjects of a king into being citizens of a nation. This right here is the whole ballgame. The revolution flipped the script entirely. France went from an absolute monarchy, where your whole life was decided by who your parents were, to a constitutional monarchy. The king's power was now limited by law, and the whole system was supposed to be based on the rights of man. You weren't just a subject anymore. You were a citizen with rights. And that is the ultimate legacy. This is the big so what. The French Revolution basically gave us the political playbook for the modern world. The idea that you, as an individual, have rights. The idea that everyone should be equal before the law. The idea that liberty is something worth fighting for. These weren't just French ideas. They spread like wildfire, inspiring people all over the planet. So we'll leave it with this question to think about. The revolution unleashed these incredibly powerful, world-changing ideas of individual rights and equality. But what actually happens when those ideas travel, when they get picked up and adapted by different people in different countries for different struggles? Well, that's the ongoing and often chaotic story that began all the way back in 1789.